Digital Literacy Bootcamp that's our program that aims at discussing variety of topics related to digitalization in microfinance institutions. The practitioners that participate in this program are able to understand the basic concepts and basic practices, which we hope that understanding of this will help you make proper decisions, hire proper people, and deliver proper projects under this very general and broad topic of digitalization. The bootcamp is co-financed by European Union Programme for Employment and Social Innovation. As you can see today, we are talking about two buzzwords, Agile and Scrum. Both come from the IT world, but today we are going to talk not only about how to use Agile way of work in digital or IT projects, but also how we can use it in microfinance institutions outside of IT projects. We will also learn how we can use the elements of Scrum approach or methodology, if you wish, in daily work, of teams in MFIs. So no matter if you plan an IT project or not, this webinar will bring you some useful tips for your teamwork, which in this changing environment that we are all facing today. So with me, there is Jente Minne, who is responsible for digital transformation in microStart, which is a Belgium-based MFI. Jente, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be with us today and to share your experience and practical your knowledge and practical experience in the digital transformation of your MFI. So good morning, Jente.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Before we actually jump into the webinar, let me propose the sort of warm-up exercise. Let's see who we are, what group we are. So I would like to ask you to mark the country you are coming from or you are currently based. You can use your toolbar and use the option annotate and mark simply the country you are coming from. So feel free to take a few seconds now to mark the country. I see we have people from Poland, Romania, from Balkans, Romania again. Okay, so right, okay, nice. We have so mostly Europe for now. Okay, so quite a diversified group. So so welcome again to the webinar. As you can see, you can use various tools of this platform to communicate. Again, I would encourage you to ask chat box to communicate with us. So now, before I will let Jente really talk about his experience, let me just say a few more words about the EasyTA, Easy Technical Assistance, which is available to MFIs. MFC works under in this program within the consortium with Frankfurt School and European Microfinance Network. The geographical coverage of this program consists of European Union member countries as well as selected countries like Albania, Macedonia, Montenegro, Norway, Serbia, and Turkey. So if you are coming from one of those countries, you can apply for technical assistance. Let me just say that that TA that is offered for those MFIs who have gone through the call of expression of interest launched by the European Commission, they can receive a free of charge technical assistance that consists of training courses and other TA that is tailored to individual needs of those selected institutions. Under this component, we offer investment readiness training and institutional assessments. And for other microcredit providers that have signed up to the European Code of Conduct, we are offering trainings on implementation of the code and preparation of MFIs to go through the evaluation. For the wider European microcredit sector, we are offering events like, for example, this webinar, where we share the practices of peers and where we simply exchange the experience. So I really encourage you to apply or to contact the people responsible for the program. And with this, I will stop and I will ask Jente to share his presentation, and we are deep diving into Agile and Scrum. So again, please ask your questions, unmute yourself as we go, or ask your questions in the chat box. We will also stop Jente's presentation every now and then just to make sure that all your questions are answered, or also to hear your comments. So Jente, the time is yours now.
Great, thanks a lot, everybody. And also welcome to be all present. I see there's 44 people here, so that's really wonderful to see this. So as we said before, my name is Jente. Just to talk a little bit about me, I have a master in product design. So I graduated as a product developer, not as an IT developer. And I did an additional master in the European Microfinance Programme in the business school of Solvay. So that gave me also like more broad knowledge on microfinance in the world. I see there's already a question. All right. And I have currently more than 5 years of experience at microStart, 5.5 years. Before I was working as an IT manager at microStart, I also have I have quite some experience as being a volunteer and a training manager for business development services at microStart. So that means that I've not only like an IT background. Basically, I was starting as in a more operational function, and little by little, I became IT manager.
So there is hope for all of us that we can understand digital and agile and Scrum despite lack of educational background.
No, yes, for sure. I don't think it's only an IT aspect, and I think it's really important in IT teams to have people that are more business-minded, business analysts, for example. It's really important, but I think we'll get to that also. Since 2016, I'm responsible for the digital transformation of microStart. So we're undergoing a digital transformation, and I'm project manager. As before, I was project manager on the volunteer and training program. So I'm not myself a technical profile. Over the years, because we're a rather small organization, I've been deep diving in some developments, but it's definitely not what I'm best at. I'm more representing the business side of in the development team, if you wish. So I'll go to the next slide. Who's microStart? We are the leading microfinance institution in Belgium. That's when we talk about professional microcredits. So we have one other organization that's bigger, but they do personal credits. We are the biggest one in professional microcredits. What do I mean with that? It's credits for entrepreneurs that want to start up or develop further their business. Since 2011, we have done more or less, we have financed more or less 3,700 clients. with over 5,000 credits, and we've injected more or less 38 million euros in our national economy. We're only active in Belgium, and we have 35 employees. We also do impact measurement. For us, that's really important. And we see that 75% of the entrepreneurs that start with us, after 2 years, they're still ongoing. If they're not ongoing, 9% of them found another job, or they're inserted in the economy in another way. So we say that we have like a success rate of 84% of the people that we finance. That's also due to our business development services that we really try to help them not only with credits, but also with all types of training. If we look at our developments that we're undergoing now, we have an ambitious plan for 2020-2022 on digital, but in general also. And I'll not explain all of them, but one thing that we want to do is we want to make all our services, all our IT services mobile. And this is as well for the clients, for partners, as for our staff internally. We've been working on a fundraising or a grant management tool implemented in Salesforce. We're undergoing a redesign of our website where we did the UX and UI, so the study on how the user uses our website. We have done it, and now we'll start development work. And the biggest project, and I'll talk about it today also, is that we are replacing our loan management system. So basically, it's our core banking system that we are currently replacing. That's a collaboration with Singlify and with Accenture. Furthermore, we're going to do a redesign of our loan application, and we hope next year that we can build a client portal application and website where the client can consult their credits, pay back their credits, see their training program, and inscribe for a new training. As you will see from June 2020, we want to have a 360% view of all our stakeholders in one system. So that means our clients, our partners, our volunteers, and our staff. We want to have one system that basically brings everything together. We have chosen Salesforce for this. Before we start about the topic of today, I wanted to know who has heard already about Agile. So we'll do a little poll to see what your knowledge is.
Okay, hold on a second. We are starting. We will start the poll shortly. Just give me a second. Okay, so you should see on your screens the poll. The poll with like, what do you know about the Agile? So let's just have a brief mapping of experiences. So I would please just click the answer. Whatever answer relates to you best, meaning if you've just heard about the word, or you've been working with Agile or Scrum. So let's just see who is in the room and what kind of experience we have. We still 74% of the group already voted. So let's just have a few more seconds. I think, all right, I think most of the people voted. So let's see the results. Let me share the results with you. So you should see the results right now that actually almost half of us only heard about the word, but nothing more, which is good because this webinar is exactly for you. 36% have heard about Agile and Scrum, and only actually 17% worked in the Agile way, or 3% have been implementing Scrum. So great. So those of you who are more experienced, we are happy to hear your experience as we go. Then I think this webinar is really for a majority of us. So great, Jente, Let's continue then.
All right, great. Very happy also to see that our public is very active, that they're all responding. That's nice to see. So when we talk about Agile, and as we said before, it's not something that is only like an IT buzzword. It's more kind of a mindset. So you can apply Agile, of course, with your IT development team, but it will never work if only your IT department is Agile and if the rest of your organization is not Agile. Very fast, you will see that there's issues. On the other hand, being Agile, it's not rocket science neither. It's just a mindset that you can have in your company, whatever business you're in. You can talk for a long time about Agile. That will be out of scope of this webinar. It's just 1 hour for everything. So I'll go into the most important points. And you can always find a lot of information on this mindset also online. So the 4 most important points, to my opinion, is that Agile Manifesto says that individuals and interactions, it's more important than processes and tools. So you will really look at the force of your staff. You will try to talk with people, and that's important. That doesn't mean you don't need processes and tools, and that's with the 4 points. Over means that you still need the other side, the right side, but the left gets the most importance to it. And that's something I really want to stretch, because some people, for example, in the second point, it's a working product over comprehensive documentation. Sometimes you hear from people that they don't need documentation because they're working in an agile way. Of course, that's not at all true. I mean, you still need documentation, but putting in the focus that your product can be used easily by your end user, that if they need some additional information, that they can find it right away in your software or where they need it. So the right information at the right time. That's more interesting than having a lot of guidebooks and manuals next to it that, let's be honest, at least it's my experience, most of the people never read. Then another important part, it's the trust that you put in the organization you work with, if you work with consultants, and also the trust that they put in you. So Agile says that they prefer working on customer collaboration than really putting everything in contracts until the slightest detail and having every clause in the contract defined until the end. That doesn't mean you don't need contracts, of course not. That doesn't mean you don't need to be careful with contracts. But especially in complex and in chaotic projects, it's very difficult to foresee everything already in a contract. So this basic trust is really important, and that you obtain by working together with the service provider, or from the other side, that they really collaborate together with you as a client.
Mm-hmm. So just to stop here, by service providers, so these other sides of the contract, we can mean anybody who provides services to the MFI, like IT company or marketing agency or any other type of provider that develops a solution for MFI or for the clients or of the MFI, right?
Yes, for sure. It can be a communication consultancy, for example, a communication office. It can be IT consultants. Like I said, Agile, it doesn't have to apply necessarily only on IT projects, that's for sure. And then another important thing of the Agile Manifesto is that we find it more important to respond to change than to follow a plan. So the idea is that business needs might change very fast. There's also very fast some opportunities depending on the market and depending on the sector you are. And so it's important to be reactive to it and making plans of 5 years and sticking to it in a kind of narrow way. Again, having a plan, and we'll come to that later also, it remains important, but they put more the attention on the left column rather than the right column. Besides these 4 big points that I explained now, there's also 12 principles of Agile. I will not go into it during this webinar, but you can find them very easily online, and there's so much documentation on it. I think the most important thing is to know is that it's a mindset. So it doesn't mean later on we will talk about Scrum. It doesn't mean because you implement some tools from Scrum that you're necessarily Agile. And it's not, and you can be very Agile without doing Scrum. Scrum is just a way how you can obtain it, but Agile, it's really a mindset in your organization that you want to install, basically. One of the things, and it refers to following a plan or being adaptive. One of the big advantages that's been seen in an Agile way of working is that instead of working in a waterfall way, the classical waterfall way, where you have your analysis up front, which can take sometimes 6 months. Then you will go in a design phase, will take another couple of months, and then you start implementing. Agile works in another way. So in waterfall, you will do them more or less linear, one after another. And during your analysis, design, and until the end of the implementation phase, you will not push anything in production. And so you won't get any money from it. It will only cost you money. Now, if you look at Agile, it's a different way of working. You will start with a small product, and you will always go through these phases in a circular way. So you will do implementation, analysis, writing your requirements, and design. You'll push this in production. This will give you your MVP. And I will explain right away where there are a lot of coffees on your presentation. It's not because I'm tired, but they really mean something. We'll see it in the next slide. And then based on that, you will redo this methodology. So analysis, making the design and the implementation, and you will increment your product. What does it mean? You have a lot faster return on investment, because already for the smallest development, the MVP as they call it, you will start earning money from it if you put it on the market. Earning money, it can be that your stuff is more efficient, or that you can get more clients, or it's not necessarily money right away, but in a business, you will get more profit from it. And in a circular way, basically you have costs, but also you get the benefits for every increment that you make. Another important thing is that your learning curve goes very different between waterfall and Agile, because in waterfall, if you're not used to do IT projects, you only go once during the whole project, which can take 2 or 3 years. You only go once through all these procedures, making the requirements, doing the design, testing, implementation. With Agile, for example, in this example, you already have gone through all these steps 3 times. And after every step that you do, you have basically an evaluation that you can make where you can learn a lot from. But also, as you're making a product, you're putting in the market, after every sprint, as I call it, the circular methodologies that you see at the bottom of your page. After every time you can get feedback from your clients, you can get feedback from the implementation, and so you can adapt a lot faster, and you can also get a lot more customer feedback that allows you to learn and to be adaptive regarding to the needs. And this is just one of the essential things about waterfall and Agile, waterfall being the classic way and Agile why people like to use it. So let's talk about the coffees now. So basically in the Agile way of working, and it's not only in Agile, but in Lean, for example, it's used also, but we talk about something which is the minimal viable product. And the minimal viable product, it's the minimum product that you can develop and put on the market, and that can generate value for you. If it's internally, it's a minimum product that your staff would be ready to adapt to because they see the advantages. If you put it on the market, it's the minimum of product basically that someone wants to pay for. So in our case now, it's the regular coffee. There's no biscuits, there's no cream to it. It's just a coffee. The coffee itself, it's good. So what you develop, it's good, but it's nothing more than a coffee. People will pay for it already. So if you open up a bar, for example, not at all IT, if you start giving just a clean, good coffee, the chance is big already that you will have a public that wants to pay for it. But of course, you might want to go further. You want to offer like a big coffee, maybe something in it, maybe an Irish coffee. It looks a bit like an Irish coffee, this one. And basically what you can do is you can go from your MVP, little by little, you can increment. For example, you can put whipped cream on it next time. You can add a little biscuit to it. You can, and little by little, like this, what they call sprints, you go basically to a product, an incremented product, which is really what you want to make. during this phase, for example, if you added a cookie to it, but the clients say they don't like this cookie, it's easy to change it again. Oops, you don't take the cookie, you put another, I don't know, another type of candy to it. And because every time you offer it to your clients, every increment, you get the feedback also from your clients. And this is one of the core, I think, core values of the Agile way of working. This increments instead of planning everything in advance and then coming with a product on the market 2 or 3 years later, where you really hope, you cross your fingers that it's according to the initial needs.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, the biggest change here from the comparing to the traditional approach is that you start working with anything that is good enough to be offered to your either external clients, meaning microfinance clients, or to your internal clients like your staff, your field staff, or whoever you worked within inside MFI. So you start with something very basic, very say black coffee. That's really something very simple. But you start working and you get the first feedback, you get the first reactions, and then you know if you continue with this product or you need to change. And if you continue, then you can kind of experiment with new options, adding a cream, adding a biscuit, and so on. Correct?
Yes, it's really about features. So your MVP, the coffee, it needs to be good coffee. They don't say like use a cheap coffee, but just the basic product is there. What you develop always needs to be good. So it's not like doing the bare minimum that people will use it, but it's on the amount of features. Basically, you want to have a good base where then you can build on further with features. That's correct, yeah. When to use Agile, it's definitely not always needed to use Agile. For example, if you have your staff and you're planning in all your instruction meetings, your meetings where you meet with the client to write a credit file, this is something which is more or less always the same. Your staff is used to it. Once that they've done it, once they've done like hundreds of these meetings, they know how it works, they know how much time they need. They can actually, you can plan it in as a simple waterfall way of working. You can, for example, say to your staff, the next 6 months, we will, I will make meeting slots where you can meet with the clients, and we will automate this, and automatically they get filled in. And this you can perfectly do in a waterfall way. Another example, for example, is it's not that simple, but for example, in construction work, it's not always a good idea to work in the Agile way and keep on building. Sometimes you need just a plan for 3 or 4 years, basically, that the construction is stable and that you build on it in this way. If you would do construction way in an Agile way, you might end up like the slums, for example, in Brazil, where you get these houses where you get always extra things built on it, which is understandable why they do, but it's not always the best way of making constructions. So we don't say that you always have to use Agile. When is Agile known to be very useful? It's when it's more complex, and then they say you would use Scrum more. And when it's really chaotic, then you can use Kanban. What does it mean, complex? For example, if you don't know the technology well, you don't know how to, which technology you want to use, which are the features of it, or you're not very sure what you want to develop, what you really need. For example, you make a client platform where your clients want to do payments on, where they want to do training on. It's the first time you do this. It's the first time you develop something for your clients. You're not sure which technology yet to use. Then you can go more to a Scrum way of working. An example of chaotic, where they advise Kanban, it's, for example, we're implementing our loan management system, a new one. You messed it up. It didn't work. You have a lot of issues. The payments are not getting through. The loan schedules are not correct. And you get your 40 staff that are coming to you with all kinds of issues. Then it gets a really chaotic situation. And basically what you do, and it's a bit out of scope of our meeting, but is you write down all the problems that there are. you'll put them in an order of priority, which one is the most urgent, and one by one you just start solving them. That's more that's more when you're in a chaotic type of doing, and then basically the amount of project management is actually very little. Scrum has still a kind of a very defined project methodology. One practical case where we used the Agile way of working, and it's actually, I call it Agile by accident. It was my first development that I did in 2016, and we were going to work together with two different partners. And one of the partners, so we were developing basically an online credit application. The client could go on our website, make a loan simulation, and then write their information so we could start their loan application. We started developing it in the front end in Drupal, and then we saw during the project already, it was all with new partners, so everything was kind of still complex. And then we saw, the idea was to integrate it fully with our CRM system, with our system that follows up our clients. But during the process, by accident, and maybe it's good that this happened, the other partner, they stopped it. They didn't want to do it anymore. They had other projects. They didn't have the time for us. And so we basically were only able to build a front end, but it was not sending any information to our system. So what did we do? We made a solution that it would send emails to us, and we just started experimenting with this tool. So it was a form, and it would just send emails to us, and then based on that, we would put everything manually in our system. And why do I like it? Because by this accident, actually, this form remained very light and very easy to change, and we were able to do quite some testing. It was already a good product. I mean, the clients filled it in quite a lot. So first, we saw that there was a demand for these online credit applications. So further on, we could make an investment decision based on a real test with the customer and not on just like customer tests, which are always difficult to do. We were seeing like that demands were coming in, but also we would understand better by using this form, by tracking the fields on it, which fields we should put up front, which fields we should lower. And it was still very easy to adapt it because it was not connected to other systems. So that made it, for us, a really good learning experience. And then afterwards, we did a second version of it where we connected it to our system, to our Salesforce system. So that's what I call Agile by accident. But it was around that time, I was not aware of this. I didn't know we did it in an Agile way, but now going back to it, I think it's interesting to see, because it's just common sense, basically. Another case, which could be like outside of your business and where we use it all the time already. For example, if you're a small MFI, you don't have a lot of means and you want to make a communication plan. Okay, you can start defining all the communications tools that you want to do, all the messages that you would put there, which target group, and you can define everything already up front. But we know also that your small organization won't have time to use all the tools. So probably you will start experimenting, for example, only with LinkedIn and Facebook. You will see how the messages goes, and then you will further increment. You will add additional tools. You might have afterwards Twitter. You might have some other new tools that you add. And then maybe after you have like 6 or 7, you figure out that you need like one software that manages all of them in a unified way. And that's basically also a way of working agile. The same thing, for example, if you open up an office, if you're new in a certain country, you're not going to open up 50 offices normally right away in one country. Normally you start with 1 or 2, you take the places where it's good to test, and little by little you expand. And so when it's out of IT, it's always kind of logical to start this way, but when it's IT, very fast, especially older IT departments, they go back to this classical way of waterfall. But it's not something that should be only in an IT project, I think.
Okay, Jente, let me stop here for a second and check with our participants if there are any questions. So we've just covered the sort of definition of agile and of agility as a mindset. So we will go now into details, into elements of Scrum. But let me check if there are any questions so far, either to the examples or to the definition. If you have a question, you can unmute yourself now or type in the question in the chat box. Okay, I think we can continue. So again, feel free if any comments or questions come to your mind, just type them in to the chat box. Thank you so far for the comments. Okay, Jente.
Great. Let's dive into Scrum then. So what is Scrum? Maybe there's one before we start. No, all right. So Scrum is basically an agile process framework for managing complex knowledge work. So it's a way how you can attend agile, but it doesn't mean because you're doing Scrum that you're necessarily agile. And it's definitely useful if you get in a complex project management. That's basically what the definition is saying. And you see already the symbol of Scrum, and we'll get to it why it's this certain symbol. Because this we can see in the Scrum process. So basically what happens in a Scrum process, you have a product backlog, and a product backlog, it's a product owner that's responsible for it. And it's a set of user stories, which are, I'll get more into the detail with that further. And it's just a list of all these user stories. From there on, we will go to a sprint planning. We will take some of these user stories and we'll put it in a sprint, which typically takes between 2 or 3 weeks. And this is the work that you will do during these 2-3 weeks. The idea is that the team is only busy with this work during the sprint. So they shouldn't be on other side projects or on other things. They should be dedicated to this sprint. And all the items that they need to attend, they're in the sprint backlog. Then you get a sprint. Normally it's 2 to 3 weeks. You can do 1 week or 4 weeks, but knowing that 1 week you will get a lot of meetings for just 1 week of work. It might be if you have a big team, but it's a bit an overkill on administrative work, I think. And 4 weeks, it's already a bit long. So at least we always work with 2 or 3 weeks, but why not? 1 or 4 weeks might be possible also. And basically you're gonna, for these 3 weeks, you will work all the time on this project. And every day you will get a daily Scrum. It's a meeting, it's a very short meeting, normally 15 minutes. And I'll explain in detail also what it is. And during that, you have a Scrum Master, which is the person who will represent the development team or the implementing team if it's not IT. And then you finish, and then you get basically an increment on your product. The idea is after these 2 or 3 weeks that you have a product that you're at least able to put in production. The decision to push it in production or not might be for some reasons done and said, no, we don't put it in production. But the idea is that at least what you provide, you can already put it in production. And then you do a retrospective. So you do basically an evaluation of what happened during the sprint. So this is the framework. Now I'll go more in detail of each of these elements. First of all, what's a user story? A user story, it's very similar to, well, it's a type of specification. So what do you want basically? But it's defined really from the perspective of your end user. So what do you say as, for example, as a credit advisor, I want to send automatic updates to my client so that I don't lose time emailing them myself. So it's very important that first of all, you're going to identify yourself with the end user. Then in the second time, you say what your end user want to do. So basically that's the core of what will be developed. And then the last part, why do you want to do this? If you define it in this way, you give your developers, and it can be IT developers, but it can be also like, for example, working on communication. You give them basically the context to also think out of the box and to really understand your end user. So it's very important to have these three elements in your user story. This is basically the title of your user story. So you can see there's a little post-it where you put on in front of it this phrase, and everybody in the project will then right away know what it's about. When you go further within the user stories, you have a little card. So basically the idea is that your user story is not too big, but it can fit on a card, and you will define more, because with this phrase on its own, the developers won't know what they have to do. But what's more important, you can write a lot on it, but the idea is that the development team talks with the person who has written down this user story, and they get more in detail on this topic. So rather than making like a full description of pages on one specification, the conversation is very important. And the developers will give ideas, and the business side will give ideas, and that's actually how you come to an agreement on what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Jente, there is a question to this slide. Does user stand outside of the process, or can be part of the team working on delivery? So if you can give one more example and explain maybe.
Yes, it's definitely, so for example, how we work, and it's a bit my role as a product owner. Me as a product owner, it's the person who represents the business, let's say, the business side from the development. I work in workshops with clients, with our credit advisor, with our risk team, with our team. So normally how we do it, but you have different ways of working, is that the product owner, this person, he can organize these workshops to define the user stories. But in certain like conditions, why not invite even an end user to your meetings, for example, to your sprint planning? It's possible, yes. Mm-hmm. It's a product owner's call, basically, on how he obtains the information from the end user.
So in principle, we develop the solution for end user, right? So that's why we ask user stories how they want to use this solution. So we can ask clients how they want to use a client portal, or we ask credit officers how they want to use an app that will help them with managing their loan applications. So they kind of stand outside the process, but in certain, if that's needed for the process, if that's good for developing the solution, the product owner can invite those representatives of those users to the meetings.
I think it's a very interesting conversation, and it's also one of the, not really critics, but one of the limitations I think that's to Agile is Agile is really good for implementation, but it's not so good for what we call the pre-project analysis. And you have other, and there, at least like in the documentation that I was reading, like they say the role of a business analyst. And the business analyst is the one who gets closest to a product owner, is very important. And I think, for example, methodologies as design thinking, and then from design thinking, for example, going rather to lean, that really allows you to, but especially design thinking really allows you better to do this pre-project analysis in a way that you get input from your clients, and that you start making already some models that you can test with clients, and that you can and Agile, they recognize this, but they're not that much developed in it. I think design thinking is more interesting way. And of course, you combine it. It's not you're doing not design thinking or Agile, depending on which phase you are. Also, the resources you have. I mean, it all depends if you can hire, for example, a business analyst that knows how to do this or not. You you adapt.
So design thinking kind of brings you, allows you to collect content regarding user stories so that you can develop actually those user stories, and then Agile just works on the user stories in order to develop the actual solution. Yeah.
It goes a bit beyond scope, but design thinking is really a methodology on how can you get knowledge from your clients. It's not only just user stories, it's also user stories, they're individual specifications, but you need to have like the whole progress also. You need to have from the start that the client comes in until the end, you need to have a story. And individual user stories are very fragmented. So sometimes it's good to have like a full overview on how do your clients interact, or your end user interacts with the system. And their user stories might be a bit too fractioned. There are systems for it, of course, to solve this, but then we go very detailed in some tools. Yeah, then I think we'll go too much in detail for this webinar.
Right. Yeah. Tatiana, thank you for your question. Let us know if that answered your question, and yeah, keep on typing in your questions as we go. Jente, please continue.
All right. So after the conversation, you also agree on when is a user story considered to be, when they develop it, when it's considered to be done. So you will put a kind of confirmation or a control where you say, for example, this and this and this test, I will let you do by my testers. And if these things are tested, then accept this user story has been done by the developers. Let me give you an example. It is, for example, I want to create a document. I want to create a contract. And one of these tests could be, if I click on this button, automatically the contract comes out in Dutch for Dutch clients and in French for French clients. And then the tester knows, okay, I have a French client in front of me. I push on this button, the French contract comes out. Okay, it's developed as designed, as they say. If you have a French client in front of you and a Dutch document comes out, then you know that there's a bug, that there's an issue with this user story, and then you can send it back to the developers for fixing it. And that's what we call the acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria, they're measurable, so that's an important thing. I will not go too much into the rights column, which is the invest, but it's also important that how to write user stories. Actually, you can talk days about it. It's like a skill you need to learn. It's important that they're small enough, that they're independent, and that they add value to your product, and that you can estimate how much time they will take. This is important to be able to make a planning if you work in Scrum. And they should be small and testable. And all these user stories, they will create what we call a product backlog. And what will you see? So we have seen the page, the previous slide. That's actually when your user story is done and you can give story points, or you can measure the time that they need to develop it. But of course, not all your user stories right away you will develop like this. You might have some wild ideas of things that you will do in 2 years. You're not going to lose your time already defining all these things into detail, because then you lose way too much time and resources for things that in 2 years they might change already. So what do we see if you look at the product backlog? Basically everything which will be developed very soon. And normally they talk about 2 or 3 sprints. So like a month and a half. You will really define until the finest detail, and you'll be able to measure them how much time they will take you. When you go further in your product backlog, so when things that will be developed in 6 months, in 1 year, in 2 years, they will be more vague. They will be vaguely defined. What do we see? Sprint plan, that means that you already put them in a sprint. Groomed, it means that already you did a discussion with the developers, and so the developers know already how they will develop this user story, and they can already give like an estimation of a time that they will work on it. And then everything which is future, that will be user stories that are still vague, and it can be gigantic blocks. For example, I had user story one time. I want to have a client platform where a client can do their payments. If it's this big, we don't call it a user story anymore, but we call it an epic, because you know that this epic, it will contain afterwards 50 user stories or something. The sprint planning, so that's basically, if we go back to the previous slide, everything which is on top that are sprint planned, you will put them in a sprint planning. And basically it means you will make a wall. You can even do it with Post-its. You don't need software for it. You take a wall, you write on the Post-its all the user stories that you want to do in a certain sprint, and you start putting them on the wall. You have estimated already how much time that will take. So you will have an amount of what we call story points. It's a time estimation of how much time it will take. And you will talk together with the developers. Is it reasonable to do this 20, 30 Post-its that you have to do it in this sprint? You will discuss about it. You will select the ones that are useful, that maybe have some dependency. Sometimes it can happen. and you will put them all on the wall ready for development for the sprint. Then when the developers have developed something, or worked on something, they can take the post-it and put it in other status. For example, ready from development, developer will work on something, he'll put it in progress. If he has done, if he has built it, he's ready with it for it, then he can say, okay, let's put it in testing for one of my technical colleagues, which is our unit testing. If this one is ready, then I can say, let the business test it now if it's fine. And it's basically sprint planning. You just make an overview of all the user stories you want to do. And during the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you will keep track of them in a way. And what's interesting, why don't they put really normally time on it, but more story points? It's because in the beginning, if the system is complex, it will be difficult to estimate how much time that people will work on a certain user story. And so they will give more relative values. They will say story points. And little by little, if you work a lot with the team, you will understand how much story points you can do in one sprint. And then you get more better detailed estimations on how much time your development team will work on your next sprint. Normally sprints always remain the same time. So you're not going to do one time sprint of 1 week, then of 2 weeks, but you will know how many user stories you can add into one sprint. The daily scrum. So it's a daily meeting we've been talking about. And basically it's a very short meeting where in 15 minutes, so that's the whole time of the meeting, your whole team needs to be able to have said, what did I do yesterday? What will they do today? And do they have any things that blocks them? This is the case if you do it in the morning. If you do it in the evening, you can also say, what did I do today? What will I do tomorrow? And do I see any blocking points?
So actually, this is one of those elements of the Scrum which can be also adapted outside the IT projects, sure. And definitely something that stimulates the teamwork on big projects, but not necessarily in IT.
I think, for example, communication strategies would be, communication campaigns would be a very interesting one where you need to fast in 2 or 3 weeks. You need to get everything ready within 2 weeks. Like deadlines is kind of important there, and you will have people that work on very different things. One person will work on the graphical design, the other one will work on the content, the other one will, but maybe they have skills they can share with each other, so they can maybe deblock one to another. And the idea is just to find this basically. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? Some person might say, you work on this today. I have an idea how I can help you with that. That's how far you go. You say after this meeting, you go sit together and you figure it out, the two of you. Or you can have, I'm blocked on this graphical part, this graphical design. I have a good idea that I've seen with with another organization. Okay, go sit together and afterwards, but at least you all listen to each other for 15 minutes. You know where everybody is. You see that you work together on the project and you can help each other out on the project. And this is important because in Scrum, they like to work with cross-functional teams. So they like to work with teams that don't only can do their specialization, but they can only do some other things. For example, a copywriter, someone that writes text, they can also do some graphical work. It's interesting to see these exchanges. Graphical designer that also knows a bit of website design. It's always interesting to have these kind of cross-functional personalities.
Right. So in principle, in any big project, when there is a deadline upcoming and you have a team working on this can be useful simply.
Yes, for sure. If we go to the next slide, the sprint review, it's after the 2 or 3 weeks that you've been working on a sprint. You let the people that worked on it, your implementing group, you let them present what they've done. And they will present all the features that they've been working on. And so you give them also like the stage, you give them the pride, what they worked on. And at the same time, you have a good overview on what has been done during this sprint, during this 2 or 3 weeks of developments. You will, at the same time, you will update your product backlog because you see what has been done or not. And you can already see when you will do the next sprint if it's not right away afterwards. often they leave 1 or 2 weeks between one sprint so everybody can relax a bit. Well, relax is not a good word, but they can work on other things, their emails that they didn't have time to attend, or other aspects that they had to leave behind for the sprint.
Right,
because you have to be dedicated to your sprint.
Yeah, this is what you said in the beginning, that when you use the methodology, you make sure that people can focus for the planned week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the sprint, that they can focus on this work. So all other tasks need to be put aside, and so this time of relax is actually the time to catch up with other tasks, which is not very promising, but that's the life. Okay.
No, it is, and it is complicated, but especially for IT developers, it's really frustrating when they deep dived into something and then they need to be busy with some other support work or other. It gets them out of their concentration, and it gives a stress that shouldn't be there.
Okay.
Then the sprint retrospective. There you're going to talk more on, okay, how did this sprint work? What could we have done better? What have I done well, and what could I have done better? And there, basically, you will evaluate these 3 weeks of work, and that's the really interesting thing, because in a lot of projects, only at the end of the project, which might take 6 months, a year, you will do this. But normally in the Scrum way of working, after 3-4 weeks, you will already make an evaluation, and you can get really good insights already from it. But you need this moment to sit together, to think about it, to take a break and to think about it. If not, it's difficult to have like a structured way of implementing improvements. And so it's also very, very useful, because that's one of the advantages of Agile, that very fast you start learning from what you're doing. Who's who? The product owner, we've talked a bit about him. He's who represents the business. Some people say that product owners need a lot of business analyst capacity. So some people like even to call them business analysts. It's all about words, but basically the most important is that he's responsible for the time, the scope, and the budget. He's responsible for the product backlog. And he will also help defining the priorities. He will set the priorities in the product backlog. So he'll put user stories up or down depending on the urgency. The Scrum Master, it's basically the person who represents the implementing group. Development team if it's developers, but it can be, for example, the person in the communication team. It can be someone that represents the group of the communication. What will this person do? They will define how much in a sprint can be put. So he will protect his team that there's not too much in it. He will be the facilitator. If some people are blocked, if some person doesn't know what to do, this is typical the person that will do the daily stand-ups and deblock the situation. And he is responsible for looking over the whole methodology, that everything is done according to plan. And then you have your implementation team, which basically starts implementing the product. You have some people that need to do the actual work also. So that's them. And they're self-organizing. So they try to do as much as possible to exchange ideas between them. They're ideally cross-functional, so they know more than just their expertise. And the accountability is to the team. So one is responsible for another.
Jente, there is a question. About Scrum Master, is this person actually purely technical, or the person needs to command a certain authority, meaning have certain seniority in the organization?
In Scrum, and I think more in general in Agile, we don't like to put a lot hierarchy. So they don't see it as someone who's on top of the implementation team. What I see in development teams, it's often a developer, but it doesn't need to be the most senior developer. Maybe it's a young developer, but who has good project management skills, who has good planning skills, and maybe you have a senior developer that is very specialized in one thing, but it's not that good in being a facilitator. So everybody has their strengths, and he is not seen as a supervisor of the implementing team, that not at all, but he has the skills to be the facilitator and to help.
So like to kind of bring people together and discuss things in a participatory way.
Yeah. In IT projects, it's often a developer that is good with people also, and that yeah.
Okay. Okay. Another question: where would you place a project manager in this picture? So I guess if you could kind of explain a bit more, like, who typical project manager, which role would such a person play?
It depends how big your organization is. If you really have a big organization, your project manager would be left from the product owner. So he would actually overlook the product owner, and then he might have several project owners, or he might be responsible next to the product owner for all the implementing. In my case, for example, I'm the project manager and product owner at the same time.
Okay, Jente, if we would take this example of, say, let's say that we are preparing a marketing campaign of a new loan of a new product, right? And we are preparing marketing campaign both in traditional channels and also in internet. So we have quite a few channels. We launched the product, say, March 2020. So in such an example, who would be who?
Yeah, it depends, of course, the size of your team. First of all, I think at least for us, when we do this kind of things, our product owner or project manager would be the same person. But if you would have like a team of 20 people, then, for example, you would have a project manager that overlooks the whole campaign, and then you would have several product owners that are responsible. One, for example, for the website, another one for the e-marketing campaign, the other one for.
Okay. Okay. Who decides on the another question? Who decides on the priorities that Scrum team follows? Since requirements may come from more than one product owner. That's a good question.
One product owner is one team. So it's not that different product owners will have. So you can have different Scrum team. Different Scrum teams. Which I never worked it way, but you have like methodologies for it for really like big developments. But normally one product owner is dedicated to one development team and one Scrum Master is dedicated to it.
Very clear. And then, if you would have many, say a few product owners, so a few Scrum teams, so one person can work in how many teams? Scrum teams?
One developer?
Yeah. Say yes, implementation.
That's a difficult one. Normally, you want a member of your team to be fully dedicated to one. But of course, sometimes you have very specialized people that have very specific skills that you need in different teams, and then sometimes you have to attribute them for example, 50%, 50%. I mean,
so it all depends.
There's not one rule that fits all, but. Yeah, this dedication, I mean, it can cause extra tensions if you start putting them in different people, because like you say, there's another product owner that you can get fights between product owners, or you can, it can make it more complicated.
Okay, thank you for all the questions.
Right,
also.
no question.
We can continue.
All right. So I'll give you one case study. It's a replacement of our loan management system. And basically we're doing it right now. Why do I take this case? Also to show you some of the difficulties that we overcome. We're already working for a while with Scrum or more Kanban style, but still this project is a big project and it's not always easy to implement it. And I can also say that I'm not implementing it 100%. Also depends how big your team is, how much you can implement it. We work with 5 partners. Singlify, who is basically selling us the product. So it's already a product that has all the loan management functionalities into it. And this one we will adapt to our Salesforce environment. We have As You Go, who has been working on our Salesforce for 2 years now. We have ourselves, of course, microStart. We have Uwazi, who is the implementing partner of Singlify, and we have Accenture that helps us with methodology and representing the business side, if you want, product owner side. The tool we use, it's Agile Accelerator. It's the sprint screen they've seen before. It's basically a tool that helps you, and you have many tools. You have Jira or others, but it helps you to structure your process. And this is actually what I find interesting. It's the difficulties that we have. So I've been talking a lot about this coffee and the minimal viable product, and how good it is that you can already put it in production, and that you can earn money from it. But we already have a loan management system, and to be honest, pushing something in production that can do less than our current loan management system, that's very hard to sell to business, and that's not at all productive. And so, for example, in this project that I have here, it's difficult to have already, we do it through sprints, but actually we cannot put it in production yet, and we cannot have these profits from it yet. So that makes it challenging for this project. We still decided to keep on working with sprints for our internal learning curve and for better controlling of the project. But we don't have this advantage that you normally would have if you would be able to put it in production. One of the other things that we see is, and that's a bit linked to what we've said before, but Agile, normally the pre-project analysis is not very much, but you do your analysis over the whole project. So you will analyze less upfront, but we have the feeling that now the developers are developing very fast, and that we as product owners, we cannot follow anymore. If you always need to talk with different stakeholders, with your clients, with your end users, and some of them is only 1 or 2 persons, they're on holidays or other, it's difficult to get feedback, then it's complicated. And so this pre-project analysis can be, if you don't do it enough, it can be complicated. And one of the reasons why this is because we implement a product instead of doing everything from scratch. So next to defining all your specifications, your user stories, if you want, you also need to understand how the other product works. You need to do a gap analysis, and you need to see then how you need to adapt this product to your needs. And that asks more analysis than if you just have to describe your business needs. And then we see that sometimes it's difficult to maintain the different roles. Me, for example, I start developing myself in Salesforce, and I see sometimes that too much I want to say already how something should be developed. Well, this is not at all my role. And that's something, especially if you start implementing it in new development teams. If you take, for example, a product owner and he used to be a developer, he will have a lot of issues with this because he already sees the solutions, and he needs to get away from these solutions, and he needs to actually talk about the problem or about the opportunity that he wants to seize. This is how we implement it. So we have a preparation phase, which has been done. Well, it's been done really from that Accenture helped us from October, but we were already from July doing it. And then we have an implementation phase, which all goes in sprints. So the SPs, these are basically the sprints. And then we have some milestones on top and key deliverables. Which is interesting about this scheme that we have is that next to it, we have also a change management line to it. So you don't only have to develop the product, but also you need to make sure that the change management, that your end users know how to use it, how to and communicate with them. So that also we put it in kind of sprints in dedicated blocks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, Jente, we are slowly running out of time, so
I've seen it also.
We will stop here, and let me open now to questions from the audience.
Yes.
So there are questions coming in, but in the meantime, I would like to ask all of you we will launch shortly a satisfaction survey. So if you could fill it in while we are still discussing the questions that you have. So let me go with the first question. In your case, Jente, since you are the project manager, do you have the responsibility to change responsibility of the change management actions?
Yes. So me as a project manager, I'm responsible for, we have 3 lines. Data migration is one, change management, and the actual developments. And we are a small team. So for example, data migration, I'm doing myself. So there I'm like the implementing person, but at the same time, I need to have a look at change management, which is done by someone from Accenture, but I held end responsibility. And for the purple line, I also take as a product owner the end responsibility that the developments are done according as they were, that the definition on what should be done is right. The technical, if technical will develop, of course, that's the other partner, the developer's team.
Okay. There was another question. Let me just rephrase it a bit. Where else do you work in an agile way in your organization? So definitely this. You just presented the case of your loan management system replacement, but where else have you used agile in your experience?
For example, and I think that's very important, but your director's team. They should be working in an agile way. And what do I mean with that? They need to be very attentive and always search for opportunities and always search for new opportunities and being flexible to that. So for example, we made a plan now from a strategical plan 2020-2022. We did it for IT, but we did it for all types of different topics, HR, for example, commercial strategy. And on all these topics now, I see already that, that our directors, they have new ideas and they try to give them a place in this plan. So this plan, this whole strategy of our company, basically every month we have a follow-up meeting. And during this month, there's change requests can be done to any of these projects. So I think that's important that you look at, that the director's team and really your higher management, that they have this agile way of working.
Okay.
Where it's complicated, it's when you're budgeting, for example. Because for example, our board of directors, they want a fixed budget, they want to have a clear budget. And I want timing, scope, and budget very clearly defined, and it's difficult to reconciliate. I find with the agile way of working.
Okay, because from the budget perspective, everything needs to be planned, and the less changes in the budget the possible. But actually, the agile way assumes that you will make changes, so there is a clash at the beginning.
Basically, what the agile way normally says is, you give me this budget, and and I'll take care of this budget. I will follow it up in a good way. So I'll manage it in a good way. But you cannot ask me a fixed scope for this. For this budget, I will see where I get, and I know the scope will change. I embrace this change. I will follow it up as much as you want, so you can have your saying about it, but don't expect from me a fixed scope for this budget. And so that's not really easy for board of directors sometimes too.
Right, and chief financial officers,
exactly.
they might have a problem. Another question, in your experience, Jente, what are the best ways of collaboration between project manager and product owner?
Difficult one to say because I'm a bit too at the same time. Let me try to find an example. For me, the difficult thing is who's taking the lead. So what happened now is that often when I was in this situation, I would rather take the lead and would put someone else in a product owner position. How do you get it done? One, get the overview of the different aspects, IT and non-IT related, and your product owner will be more only busy on the IT related aspects. Let me give you an example. We're redesigning our website now at the same time that we have to redo our loan management system, and I don't have the time to coordinate everything. So I try to, as a project manager, I put someone else on the discussions with the developers and seeing that the business needs on this website based on a first study are well implemented. And I will have more an overall view on discussion contracts with these developers and checking that the scope and the budgets are still more or less okay. But we're a rather small organization, so for us it's not that divided in project managers, product owners.
Right.
We combine a lot of functions, even knowing that there can be a conflict of interest.
Okay, and one more interesting question. It's about where do you stop? Meaning that in this agile approach, you always kind of experiment or add new features, right, which you develop. So when do you actually stop? Or is it a never-ending process?
No. It's well, it never stops in a thing. There will be always improvements, but it's not that you can, for example, once you're in a sprint, you're not changing the specifications or user stories of your sprint. And normally the idea of Scrum is that you have very dedicated meetings where you redefine the scope. So it's not that you're changing scope all the time. Then you get more in a Kanban, in a chaotic way of working. Normally you have 3 sprints planned on ahead, and these 3 sprints are planned, you don't touch them too much. Especially the sprint you're in, you don't touch it. After every sprint, you have the sprint retrospective and the sprint review. It's during the sprint review that you have the time to actually change the other sprints. But it's not on a daily basis that you're going to change your sprints or the content that you're doing. Every sprint review, you have a possibility of reviewing your product backlog and your the other sprints.
And when do you decide that you are done? That you are done with the product, and there will be no more sprints and no more development, no new.
I would say you can always improve. So when the budget is gone, or when from a higher level, directors or of it yourself, you have the feeling that you can make more efficient developments on another product very fast, because you get the feedback, especially if you can push it often in production. You see that the changes become expensive for like small details that don't matter that much. And then you know that other products probably need more of your attention.
Right.
This prioritization, it's the responsibility of the product owner, but based on the general strategy, which is normally defined by directors.
Okay.